Sometimes the hardest thing about losing someone isn't the goodbye. It's never knowing why they left. For Martin, that pain had followed him for 40 years, a shadow he learned to live with but never understood. Now, a single father trying to give his daughter Ruby a fresh start in rural Pennsylvania, he's just looking for peace and a place to heal. But when 10-year-old Ruby finds an old car hidden deep in the woods behind their property, everything changes. Inside the trunk, they discover a voice recorder that still works. The voice belongs to Martin's mother, the woman who vanished when he was just a boy. What could she have been running from all those years ago? Before we continue, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 3 weeks earlier, Martin's pickup truck rolled to a stop on a patch of overgrown land that barely deserved to be called a driveway. The engine ticked as it cooled, and for a long moment he just sat there, hands still gripping the steering wheel, staring at what would become their new home. It wasn't much. An old camper sat in a clearing, its aluminum siding dulled by years of weather, but structurally sound. The real estate agent had called it rustic and full of potential, which Martin had learned was code for needs a lot of work and probably shouldn't be lived in. But the price was right, more accurately. It was all he could afford, and the isolation appealed to something deep in his chest that had been aching for quiet. "Is this it?" Ruby asked from the passenger seat, her voice small but not disappointed. At 10 years old, she'd learned not to expect much, a reality that broke Martin's heart every time he noticed it. "This is it, sweetheart," he said, forcing brightness into his voice. "What do you think?" Ruby pressed her face to the window, studying the clearing surrounded by dense Pennsylvania woods. The trees were thick here, their branches creating a canopy that filtered the afternoon sunlight into soft, golden streams. "It's pretty," she said finally. "Quiet, quiet, yes, that's what they needed. Quiet to grieve, quiet to heal, quiet to figure out how to be a family of 2 instead of 3. Martin climbed out and stretched, his back protesting the 6-hour drive from Philadelphia. He was 47, but some days he felt 70, especially the days when he woke up reaching for someone who wasn't there anymore. Ruby emerged from the passenger side, her small backpack slung over one shoulder, containing everything she'd insisted on bringing herself: her mother's favorite scarf, 3 books, and a photo album. The camper door stuck, swollen from humidity, but Martin shouldered it open. Inside smelled like dust and old carpet, but it was clean enough. Previous owners had left it furnished: a small table, a narrow bed in the back, a bench that converted to another sleeping space, a 2-burner stove, and a tiny refrigerator that hummed to life when Martin plugged it in. "I call the back bed," Ruby announced, already exploring. "Deal," Martin said. "I'll take the bench. More room to stretch out anyway." That first evening they unpacked what little they'd brought. Martin had sold most of their furniture, their house in the city, everything that reminded him too much of Catherine. His wife had died 2 years ago, cancer, aggressive and merciless, and he'd spent those 2 years going through the motions, working his accounting job, making sure Ruby got to school, cooking dinners neither of them had appetite for. But 6 months ago, something shifted. Ruby had stopped talking at school. Her teacher called concerned, and when Martin picked her up that day, she looked at him with eyes too old for her face and said, "I don't want to be there anymore, Daddy. It reminds me too much of before. When her mother had walked her to school, when they'd been a complete family, when the future had seemed like something other than an endless stretch of managing grief." So Martin had made a decision that his friends called impulsive, and his sister called reckless. He quit his job, sold everything, and bought this cheap piece of land site unseen. They'd start over, build something new, find a way to breathe again. That first night, they ate canned soup heated on the tiny stove and sat outside on folding chairs as darkness settled over the woods. The stars emerged, more than Martin had ever seen in the city, scattered across the sky like spilled salt. "Mom would have loved this," Ruby said quietly. Martin's throat tightened. "Yeah, baby, she would have. Do you think she can see us? From wherever she is?" He looked at his daughter's profile, illuminated by the camping lantern between them. "I think if anyone could find a way to watch over us, it would be your mother." Ruby nodded, satisfied with that answer, and they sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the forest, crickets, the distant hoot of an owl, wind moving through leaves. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Martin chopped wood from fallen trees, learning as he went, nursing blisters that became calluses. Ruby helped him build a simple chicken coop from scrap lumber, and they drove to a farm supply store to buy 6 hens that immediately made themselves at home. The chickens gave them purpose, something to feed, eggs to collect, a small task that structured their mornings. Ruby explored the edges of their property, never going far, always within shouting distance. She collected interesting rocks, pressed leaves between book pages, and started drawing again, something she hadn't done since Catherine died. Martin noticed and said nothing, afraid that acknowledging it might make it stop. Their nearest neighbor, an elderly woman named Mrs. Kimball, appeared on their 3rd day carrying a basket of preserves. She was in her 80s, sharp-eyed and spry, living in a small house about a mile down the road. "Saw your truck," she said without preamble. "Figured you might need these. I put up too many quarts every year. My husband used to eat them, but he's been gone 10 years now." Martin invited her in, and she sat at their small table, appraising them with the kind of frank assessment only the very old can get away with. "Running from something?" she asked. "Running to something, I hope," Martin replied. Mrs. Kimball nodded. "That's wise. Though I should warn you, folks around here have stories about these woods. Old stories. Nothing to worry about, mostly superstition, but the previous owners never stayed long." "What kind of stories?" Ruby asked, interested. "Oh, the usual nonsense. Lights in the trees, sounds that don't match any animal. One fellow swore he saw a woman walking through the woods at dawn, but when he called out, she vanished." Mrs. Kimball waved her hand dismissively. "Ghost stories, that's all. Every old forest has them." After she left, Ruby asked, "Do you believe in ghosts, Dad?" Martin considered the question. "I believe some places hold memories. Whether that's the same as ghosts, I don't know." That night, lying on his narrow bench while Ruby slept in the back, Martin found himself thinking about his own mother. She'd disappeared when he was 7 years old. One morning she was there, making him breakfast, kissing his forehead, and then she was gone. His father had sat him down that evening and said simply, "Your mother had to go away. She's not coming back." No explanation, no closure, just absence. His father had raised him alone, a quiet man who worked construction and never spoke about his missing wife. Martin had learned not to ask. The few times he'd tried as a child, his father's face had gone so carefully blank that Martin understood the topic was forbidden. His father had died 5 years ago, taking whatever secrets he'd held to his grave. Martin had sorted through his belongings, looking for something, a letter, a note, any explanation, but found nothing. Just the ordinary accumulation of a life. Bills paid, tools maintained, photos of Martin growing up. Now in this quiet place, those old questions stirred again. Why had his mother left? Had she ever thought about him? Was she even still alive? Ruby's voice drifted from the back. "Dad, you awake?" "Yes, sweetheart. Tell me about Grandma Catherine again." "Mum's mom?" So Martin told her stories about his mother-in-law, a warm woman who treated him like a son, who died peacefully in her sleep 3 years before Catherine got sick. He told Ruby about family dinners, about Catherine's laugh, about love that persisted even when the person was gone. What he didn't tell her, couldn't tell her, was that sometimes grief felt like drowning, and that he'd brought them here partly because he didn't know how else to keep both their heads above water. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the camper gently. In the woods beyond, something moved through the underbrush. Martin listened but didn't worry. They were safe here, isolated, far from the city that held too many memories. Tomorrow they'd explore more of their property. Tomorrow they'd keep building their new life, one day at a time. Tomorrow, though neither of them knew it yet, Ruby would find something that would change everything they thought they understood about the past. The morning Ruby found the car. The air was crisp with the first hint of autumn. She'd been awake since dawn, watching mist rise from the forest floor through the camper window, and by the time Martin stirred, she was already dressed and eager to explore. "Can we go deeper into the woods today?" she asked over breakfast. Scrambled eggs from their own chickens, a small victory that still pleased them both. Martin hesitated. The woods were dense, easy to get lost in, but Ruby had been so much better lately, more like her old self, and he couldn't bear to dim that spark of curiosity in her eyes. "We stay together," he said, "and we don't go so far we can't see our way back." Ruby nodded solemnly, and they set out after breakfast, Martin carrying a small backpack with water and snacks, Ruby armed with a walking stick she'd found and stripped of bark. The forest was different once you moved past the cleared area around their camper. The trees grew closer together, their branches interlocking overhead, creating a green twilight even in full morning. The ground was soft with decades of fallen leaves, and everywhere Martin looked, he saw the slow work of nature reclaiming itself, fallen logs covered in moss, mushrooms growing in fairy rings, ferns unfurling in the damp shadows. Ruby moved ahead, following what might have been a deer path, though it was hard to tell. Martin kept close, ducking under low branches, his boots sinking slightly in the soft earth. They'd been walking for perhaps 20 minutes when Ruby stopped so suddenly that Martin nearly ran into her. "Dad!" she said, her voice strange. "Look!" She was pointing ahead where the trees grew even thicker. At first, Martin couldn't see what had caught her attention. Then his eyes adjusted and he saw it, an unnatural shape beneath the green, something too geometric to be part of the forest. They approached carefully. Vines had grown over it, moss covered every surface, and young saplings had sprouted around it, but there was no mistaking what it was. A car. An old sedan from the 1980s, by the look of it, sitting in the middle of the woods as if it had driven there and simply stopped. "How did it get here?" Ruby whispered. Martin circled it slowly, looking for tire tracks, for any indication of a path that might have led to this spot. There was nothing. The forest had grown around the car so completely that it seemed to have been here forever, as much a part of the landscape as the trees themselves. The car was a faded blue, or had been once. Now it was mostly the color of rust and moss. The windows were intact, but filmed with dirt. The tires had long since rotted away, leaving the chassis resting on the ground. "Should we open it?" Ruby asked. Martin's accountant mind ran through the possibilities. Abandoned vehicle, possibly reported stolen decades ago, potentially someone's property. But his curiosity, that old human need to solve mysteries, was stronger. "Stand back," he said. He tried the driver's door, locked, the passenger door the same. He walked around to the back, trunk also locked. But the passenger window, when he looked closer, had a small crack in one corner. "Wait here," he told Ruby, and jogged back to the camper. He returned with a crowbar and a pair of work gloves. The window broke easily, safety glass crumbling into pebbles. Martin reached through carefully and unlocked the passenger door. It opened with a groan of protest, hinges stiff from disuse. The interior was surprisingly intact. Seats were covered in dust but not rotted. The steering wheel, the dashboard, even the rear-view mirror, all preserved by the sealed environment the car had created. It was like opening a time capsule. On the passenger seat lay a woman's cardigan, faded but whole. In the cup holder, a thermos. On the back seat, a folded map. The glove compartment yielded an owner's manual, a flashlight that no longer worked, and a silver locket. Ruby picked up the locket carefully. It opened with a soft click. Inside was a photo, a baby, maybe 6 months old, and a tiny lock of hair. "Dad," she said softly, "look at the baby." Martin took the locket, studied the photo. Something about it tugged at his memory, but he couldn't place what. "Let's check the trunk," he said. The trunk release was inside, a lever near the driver's seat. Martin pulled it, and they heard the mechanism click. The trunk lid lifted an inch, held there by 40 years of rust. Martin used the crowbar to pry it open fully. Inside, wrapped in plastic sheeting that had protected it from moisture, was a weatherproof box, the kind used for camping, designed to keep contents dry. His hands shook slightly as he lifted it out. It wasn't heavy, but something about it felt significant, weighted with more than physical mass. They carried it back to the clearing in silence. Ruby seemed to understand that whatever they'd found, it mattered. She didn't pepper him with questions, just walked beside him, occasionally glancing at the box in his arms. Back at the camper, Martin set the box on their small table. Ruby sat across from him, waiting. He opened it. Inside, carefully arranged, were the pieces of someone's life. A bundle of letters tied with string, each envelope addressed in careful handwriting to Leo. A garment bag, unzipped enough to reveal white fabric, a wedding dress. A leather-bound journal, a faded photograph showing a young woman, a man, and a small boy. And beneath it all, wrapped in cloth, a voice recorder, the kind that used cassette tapes, old but protected. Martin's breath caught in his chest. The handwriting on the letters, he knew it the way you know your own face, something so fundamental that you recognize it even after decades. "Dad?" Ruby's voice seemed to come from far away. "What is it?" He picked up one of the letters with trembling hands. The envelope was yellowed, never opened, sealed 40 years ago. The address, Leo, his childhood nickname. The one his mother had called him. The one no one had used since she disappeared. "These are from my mother," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Ruby's eyes went wide. "Your mom? The one who left?" Martin nodded, unable to speak. He picked up the voice recorder, found the play button. His finger hovered over it. "Should I?" he asked Ruby, though he was really asking himself. "You have to," she said simply. He pressed play. There was static, then silence, then a voice. A woman's voice, preserved in magnetic tape for 4 decades, speaking to him across an impossible distance. "Leo," the voice said, and Martin's eyes filled with tears because he remembered that voice, remembered it singing him lullabies, remembered it saying his name just like that. "If you're hearing this, then you found me. And I'm so sorry." The tape continued, but Martin couldn't hear it over the rushing in his ears. Ruby was beside him suddenly, her small hand on his arm, grounding him. "It's okay, Dad," she said. "We'll listen together." He nodded, rewound the tape, and pressed play again. This time he listened. "Leo, if you're hearing this, then you found me. And I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for leaving. I'm sorry for the years you've been without a mother. I'm sorry for every birthday, every Christmas, every moment I missed. But I need you to understand. I didn't leave because I didn't love you. I left because I loved you too much to let them hurt you. Them. Who was them? I had to disappear. It was the only way to keep you safe. Your father knows the truth, and he's agreed to let me go. We made this choice together, Leo, both of us. We chose your safety over everything else." The tape clicked off. Martin sat frozen, staring at the recorder. There's more," Ruby said quietly. She'd been examining the device. "Look, there are 4 tapes. This is just the first one. 4 tapes. 4 pieces of an explanation he'd waited 40 years to hear." Martin looked at the letters, at the journal, at the photograph. In the photo, he recognized himself, 7 years old, standing between his parents. His father looked the same as Martin remembered. His mother was smiling, her hand on young Martin's shoulder. And beside them stood another man, someone Martin didn't recognize, his arm around his mother's waist. Wait, that couldn't be right. That man wasn't his father. Martin flipped the photo over. On the back, in his mother's handwriting, "Before everything changed. Before I had to choose." "Dad," Ruby said gently. "Are you okay?" Was he okay? His mother hadn't just left. She'd hidden a car in the woods, filled it with explanations, and died without ever coming back. His father had lied to him for his entire childhood. Nothing about his life was what he'd thought it was. "No," he said honestly. "But I will be." "We're going to figure this out, Ruby. All of it." She nodded, her faith in him absolute and humbling. That night, Martin couldn't sleep. He lay on his bench, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the car in the woods, about his mother's voice, about the mysteries packed in that weatherproof box. Who had threatened her? Why had his father agreed to let her disappear? Who was the man in the photograph? And the biggest question of all, if she'd loved him enough to sacrifice everything, why had she never come back? The voice recorder sat on the table, 3 tapes still unplayed, holding answers he wasn't sure he was ready to hear. But ready or not, he would listen. He owed his mother that much. And he owed Ruby the truth about where they came from, about the kind of love that looked like abandonment, but was actually the opposite. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, and somewhere in the darkness the car sat in its forest grave, its secrets finally disturbed after 40 years of silence. Martin didn't sleep that night. He listened to the first tape 3 more times, memorizing every word, every pause, every catch in his mother's voice. Ruby had fallen asleep on the bench beside him, her head on his shoulder, and he'd carried her to the back bed before returning to the table where the artifacts lay spread like evidence at a crime scene. By dawn, he'd made a decision. He would approach this systematically, the way he approached accounting ledgers, one piece of information at a time, building a complete picture from fragments. He started with the letters. There were 37 of them, each sealed, each addressed to Leo in his mother's careful script. They were arranged in chronological order, the earliest dated September 1984, 2 months after she'd disappeared. The latest was dated December 1998, 15 years of letters. Never sent. Martin opened the first one with hands that shook despite his effort to stay calm. My dearest Leo, you turned 7 last month. Your father sent me a photograph. You were wearing the baseball uniform from your new team. You looked so happy, so normal, and that's what I wanted most in the world. For you to be normal. For you to have a childhood that isn't shadowed by fear. I saw you at your game last week. I stayed in my car, far enough away that you wouldn't notice, and I watched you play. You hit a double in the 3rd inning. I wanted to cheer so badly my throat hurt from holding it in. You're probably wondering why I left. Someday, when you're older, you'll understand. Your father and I made an impossible choice because we love you more than we love ourselves. That's what parents do, Leo. We make the hard choices so our children don't have to. I'm not dead, though I know that's what your father told you. I'm alive and I'm watching over you, and every single day I think about coming back. But I can't, not yet. Maybe not ever. And that's the hardest thing I've ever had to accept. Stay good, my sweet boy. Keep playing baseball. Keep making your father proud. And know that somewhere your mother is thinking of you every single moment of every single day. All my love. Mom. Martin set the letter down, vision blurred. She'd been at his baseball games. She'd been close enough to see him, and he'd never known. Ruby emerged from the back, hair tangled from sleep. Did you sleep at all? Not much, Martin admitted. Want breakfast? They cooked together in the small space, moving around each other with practiced ease. Ruby scrambled eggs while Martin made toast on the camping stove. They ate in companionable silence until Ruby finally asked, "Are you going to read all the letters?" "Eventually," Martin said. "But I think I need to hear the rest of the tapes first." "To understand the whole story," Ruby nodded. "Can I listen too?" Martin considered. The tapes might contain things a 10-year-old shouldn't hear, but Ruby had already lost her mother. She understood grief and absence better than most adults. And this was her grandmother, her history too. "Yes," he said. Together. After breakfast, they sat side by side on the bench, and Martin pressed play on the second tape. His mother's voice filled the small space again. "Leo, I need to tell you about before. Before you were born, before I met your father, before I became the person who had to disappear. I need you to understand the choices I made and why they haunted me." She paused, and they could hear her take a breath. His name was Vincent. Vincent Carver. I met him when I was 22, working as a waitress in Philadelphia. He was handsome, charming, and he made me feel special. We got engaged after 6 months. I was young and stupid and thought I'd found my fairy tale. Martin glanced at Ruby. She was listening intently, her young face serious. "The wedding dress in the trunk," his mother continued. "That was supposed to be for Vincent. But 3 weeks before the ceremony, I went to his apartment with dinner, wanting to surprise him. The door was unlocked. I walked in and found him with 3 other men, counting money. So much money, Leo, stacks of it, rubber-banded and organized on his table. And they were talking about someone who hadn't paid, someone who needed to be handled." His mother's voice dropped lower. "Vincent saw me. The other men turned. And I knew in the way you know when your life is about to change forever, that I'd seen something I wasn't supposed to see. Vincent tried to play it off, said it was a poker game, said I was overreacting. But one of the other men, Vincent's brother Philip, looked at me like I was a problem to be solved. The tape hissed with silence. I left that night, broke off the engagement, moved out of my apartment, stayed with a friend. Vincent called every day for a week, then stopped calling. I thought maybe I'd escaped. I thought maybe he'd just let me go. Another pause. Then one night, 2 months later, I heard glass breaking. Someone had thrown a brick through my friend's window. Tied to it was a note, "We don't forget." I knew then that they'd been watching me, waiting to see if I'd go to the police. And when I didn't, they wanted to remind me that I still wasn't safe. Martin felt Ruby's hand slip into his. "That's when I met your father. He was working construction on a building near the diner where I'd gotten a new job. He was kind, steady, safe. The opposite of Vincent in every way. We started dating, and 6 months later, we were married. I changed my name. We moved to a different part of the city. I thought I'd finally escaped." The tape clicked to an end. Martin sat motionless. His father had known all of this. Had married his mother, knowing she was running from dangerous people. Had taken on that risk willingly. "Dad," Ruby said quietly, "what's a loan shark?" Of course she'd picked up on that. Martin chose his words carefully. "Some people lend money and charge very high interest. Sometimes they hurt people who can't pay back what they owe. It's illegal, but it happens." Ruby processed this. "So your mom saw bad people doing bad things, and they wanted to make sure she didn't tell anyone?" "That's right, but she didn't tell." "So why did they keep bothering her?" It was a child's logic, straightforward and clear, and it highlighted the essential cruelty of what had happened. His mother had kept quiet, had fled, had changed her entire life, and it still hadn't been enough. Martin picked up the journal his mother had left. The leather cover was worn, pages yellowed. He opened to the first entry. September 15th, 1984. Leo started 2nd grade today. I watched from the car parked across from the school. He was wearing the blue shirt I bought him last year. It's getting too small. He needs new clothes. I made a list of things to send to his father. I can't be there to take him shopping, but at least I can make sure he has what he needs. I'm living in the car most days now. I found this spot in the woods, about 40 miles from the city. No one comes here. I can park under the trees, and at night I can pretend I'm camping rather than hiding. There's a stream nearby where I can wash. A gas station 5 miles away where I can use the bathroom and buy food. This isn't forever, I tell myself. Just until it's safe. Just until they forget about me. But in my heart I know. People like Philip Carver don't forget. Martin turned the page. Entry after entry, his mother had documented her life in hiding. Observations about him. Descriptions of seeing him grow up from a distance. Notes about the weather, about the forest, about the profound loneliness of her exile. October 3rd, 1984, saw Leo's father today. We met at the diner on Route 9, the one we agreed on. He brings me money, supplies, news about Leo. Today he brought photos from Leo's birthday party, 7 years old. Where did the time go? His father wants me to come home. He says it's been long enough that surely they've moved on. But I saw the car again last week, a dark sedan parked on our old street. Someone is still watching, still waiting. I told him I can't risk it. Can't risk them finding out about Leo. He argued, but finally he understood. This is the price of keeping our son safe. Martin looked up at Ruby. They were in contact. My father knew where she was the whole time. He was helping her, Ruby said. That's really brave. It was brave. His father, who Martin had always thought of as simple and uncommunicative, had been maintaining this secret for years, had been supporting his wife in exile, had raised Martin alone while keeping that impossible knowledge to himself. I need to drive into town, Martin said suddenly. There's a library there. I need to use their computers, do some research. Can I come? Martin shook his head. I need you to stay here. This won't take long and I need to focus. Can you stay with Mrs. Kimball for a few hours? Ruby agreed, though he could see she wanted to come. But some things he needed to do alone. Mrs. Kimball answered her door, wearing gardening gloves, her grey hair tied back with a bandana. She took one look at Martin's face and said, "Found something in those woods, did you?" "How did you? You have the look of someone who's seen a ghost." "Come in, tell me what you need." Martin explained he needed Ruby looked after for a few hours, that he had errands in town. Mrs. Kimball agreed without questions, though her sharp eyes suggested she knew there was more to the story. "Ruby, be good," Martin said, kissing the top of her head. "Always am," she replied, already settling at Mrs. Kimball's table where a jigsaw puzzle lay partially completed. The drive to town took 40 minutes. Martin spent it thinking about Vincent Carver and his brother Philip, about his mother living in a car in the woods, about his father carrying the weight of that secret until his death. The library was small, 2 rooms in an old converted house, but it had 3 computers and a helpful librarian who showed Martin how to access the newspaper archives. He started with Philadelphia newspapers from the early 1980s. It didn't take long to find what he was looking for. In June 1983, a federal investigation had resulted in the indictment of 15 people connected to an organized loan sharking operation. The article included names: Vincent Carver, Philip Carver, and several others. Martin's pulse quickened. He clicked through to the follow-up articles. Vincent Carver had pleaded guilty, received a reduced sentence, served 8 years. He'd been released in 1991. Philip Carver had gone to trial, been convicted, served a longer sentence. Released in 2015, Martin searched for more recent information. Vincent Carver had died in 1997. Liver failure, according to his obituary. Philip Carver was still alive, living in a nursing facility in Pittsburgh. Martin sat back in his chair, mind racing. The threat that had defined his mother's life was mostly gone. Vincent dead, Philip elderly and institutionalized. She could have come home years ago, unless there was something else. Something the tapes hadn't revealed yet. He printed the articles, paid the nominal fee, and drove back to collect Ruby. Mrs. Kimball had fed her lunch, tomato soup and grilled cheese, and they'd finished the jigsaw puzzle together. "Thank you," Martin told her. "Any time," she replied, then caught his arm as he turned to leave. "Whatever you found out there, whatever you're dealing with, you don't have to face it alone. You understand." Martin nodded, surprised by the kindness in her eyes. On the drive back to their property, Ruby asked, "Did you find what you were looking for?" "Some of it," Martin said, "but I think there's more. 2 more tapes to listen to." "Then we'll listen tonight," Ruby said. Together. And that evening, after dinner, after the sun had set and the forest had gone quiet around them, they did exactly that. The 3rd tape began with the sound of wind. For a moment, Martin thought the recording had failed, but then his mother's voice emerged, quieter than before, tired. "Leo, it's been 7 years since I left. You're 14 now. I saw you last week at your school. You've gotten so tall. You look more like your father every day, which is good. It means you're strong. It means you have his steadiness." Ruby shifted closer to Martin on the bench. Outside, night insects sang their endless song. "I want to tell you about the wedding dress," his mother continued. "I've kept it all these years, even though I never wore it. When I left Vincent, I took it with me. It was one of the few things that was truly mine. I thought about burning it, about erasing that whole chapter of my life. But I kept it because it reminds me of who I was, before I learned to be afraid." A long pause, filled with the ambient sound of forest at night. The dress was simple. Ivory silk, nothing fancy. I bought it at a little shop in South Philly with money I'd saved from waitressing. The woman who sold it to me said I'd be a beautiful bride. And for a few weeks I believed I would be. I believed I was going to have a normal life, a wedding, a home, maybe children someday. Martin heard the catch in her voice. Then I saw what Vincent really was, and I realized the dress represented a life that could never exist. But I couldn't throw it away because it also represented hope. The hope that someday, somehow I might get to start over. That's what your father gave me, Leo. A second chance. A real wedding, even if it was just at City Hall. A real marriage, even if it had to exist in pieces, Ruby whispered. She really loved your dad. Martin nodded, unable to speak. Your father comes to see me every month, his mother said. We have a place we meet. I won't say where in case someone ever finds these tapes. But we sit in his truck and he tells me about you, about your grades, your friends, the girl you asked to the school dance. And for those few hours, I get to be a wife again. I get to be your mother, even if it's only in conversation. The tape hissed. Last week he brought me photos from the dance. You wore a tie. You looked so grown up, so handsome. The girl, Jennifer, I think her name is, she looked at you like you hung the moon. I cried when I saw those photos, Leo. Happy tears and sad tears all mixed together. Happy because you're living a good life. Sad because I'm not part of it. Martin pressed pause, needing a moment. He remembered that dance. Remembered Jennifer, who'd moved away the next year. Remembered his father helping him with the tie. His father's rough hands, surprisingly gentle with the silk. His father had brought those photos to his mother. Had shared that moment with her, even though Martin hadn't known. You okay, Dad? Ruby asked. Yeah, sweetheart. Just processing. He pressed play again. The hardest part isn't the loneliness, his mother said. I've made peace with being alone. The hardest part is knowing you grew up thinking I abandoned you. Your father told me what he said, that I left, that I wasn't coming back. We agreed it was better that way. Better you think I didn't want to be there than know the truth and spend your childhood afraid, a sound like a breath. Or maybe a sob. But Leo, I want you to know, every birthday I missed, every Christmas, every baseball game, every moment of your life, I was thinking of you. I was loving you, and if I could have been there, I would have been. Please believe that. The tape ended. Martin sat in silence, Ruby's small hand in his. He thought about all those years, all those times he'd wondered why. All those nights he'd gone to bed thinking his mother simply hadn't loved him enough to stay, and all along, she'd loved him so much, she'd sacrificed everything. Dad, Ruby said softly, can we go see the dress? They walked to the car in the woods by flashlight. The path they'd created on their first visit was already becoming worn, easier to follow. The car sat in its clearing, patient as a monument. Martin retrieved the garment bag from the trunk, careful with the zipper that had held for 40 years. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper that crinkled with age, was the dress. It was simple, as his mother had said. Ivory silk, yellowed slightly with time but intact. The waist was narrow, the sleeves short, the neckline modest. It was the dress of a young woman who'd believed in happy endings. Ruby reached out, touched the fabric gently. It's beautiful. Yes, Martin agreed. Can we take it back? Keep it somewhere nice? Martin carefully rewrapped the dress and carried it back to the camper. They hung it from a hook near the back bed, the garment bag catching the lantern light, turning it into something between memory and memorial. That night, Martin read more letters. One from 1989, when he'd graduated high school. Dear Leo, I watched you walk across that stage today. I was in the back, wearing sunglasses and a hat, just another parent in the crowd. When they called your name and you received your diploma, I almost stood up and cheered. Almost gave myself away after all these years, just for the joy of celebrating your accomplishment. You're going to college in the fall. Your father told me you got into 3 schools. I'm so proud of you, Leo. So proud of the man you're becoming. You're kind, you're smart, you're everything I hoped you'd be. I'm getting older. The life I live, sleeping in a car, bathing in streams, eating from gas station convenience stores, it's taking a toll. I feel it in my bones, in the way I can't get warm anymore, even in summer. But I'm not ready to give up yet. I want to see you graduate college. I want to see you find someone who makes you happy. I want to know you're settled before I go. Stay safe, my son. Keep making me proud. Love always. Mom. Martin set the letter down. His mother had been at his high school graduation, had been close enough to hear his name called, and he'd never known. He pulled out another letter, this one from 1993. Dearest Leo, you got married yesterday. I was there, in the very back of the church, wearing a hat with a veil. No one noticed me. Everyone was watching you, and Catherine walked down the aisle. She's beautiful, Leo, and more than that, she's kind. I can see it in the way she looks at you, in the way she laughs at your jokes, in the way she touches your hand when she thinks no one's watching. You chose well, my son. Your father tells me you're happy. That's all I've ever wanted for you. Happiness, safety, a normal life with someone who loves you. I thought about revealing myself at the reception. Thought about walking up to you and saying, "Surprise, I'm not dead after all." But what would that accomplish except to ruin your perfect day? What kind of mother shows up after 16 years and demands attention on her son's wedding day? So I stayed in the shadows. I watched you dance with Catherine. I watched you cut the cake and laugh with your friends. And then I drove back to my woods and cried until I had no tears left. This is my choice, I remind myself. I chose this. And I would choose it again, 1,000 times over, if it means keeping you safe. Be happy, Leo. Love Catherine well. Build the life I couldn't give you, all my love. Mom Martin pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes. Catherine, his beautiful, funny, brave Catherine, who'd fought cancer with such grace and lost anyway. His mother had seen them together, had watched them be happy. "Dad?" Ruby's voice came from the back bed. "Are you crying?" "A little," Martin admitted. "Is it okay if I come sit with you?" "Always." Ruby padded over in her pajamas and climbed onto the bench beside him. Martin put his arm around her, and she leaned against his side. "Your grandmother saw your mom and me get married," he told her. "She was there and we didn't know." "That's sad," Ruby said. "But also kind of nice, like she was watching over you. Like a guardian angel," Martin said. "Yeah," Ruby yawned. "Are there more letters?" "Lots more. Will you read me one?" Martin selected one at random. It was dated 1996. "My dear Leo, I have news. I'm going to be a grandmother. Your father told me yesterday. Catherine is pregnant." I cried for an hour after he left, tears of joy and sorrow mixed together. Joy because you're going to be a father. Because my son is going to know that incredible love, that fierce protectiveness that comes with holding your child for the first time. Sorrow because I'll never meet this baby, never hold my grandchild. Never spoil them with cookies and stories the way grandmothers are supposed to do. But Leo, please tell your child about me someday. Not the full truth, maybe. That's too heavy for young shoulders. But tell them they had a grandmother who loved them before they were even born. Tell them that somewhere, someone was thinking of them and wishing them well. I hope for a girl. A little girl with Catherine's eyes and your smile. But boy or girl, I'll love them. And I'll watch over them the way I've watched over you. Congratulations, my son. You're going to be wonderful at this. Love always. Mom Ruby was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "She knew about me." "Not you specifically," Martin said. "But yes, she knew Catherine was pregnant. Did she ever see me?" Martin pulled out the last letter, dated December 1998. He'd been saving it, afraid of what it might contain. Now he opened it. "Dearest Leo, I saw Ruby today. You brought her to the park, the one on Maple Street, the one with the red swings. She's 2 years old now, walking and talking and absolutely perfect. She has Catherine's eyes and your stubborn chin. She laughed when you pushed her on the swing, that pure child's laughter that sounds like joy itself. I watched from my car, parked across the street. I wanted to walk over, wanted to scoop her up and tell her I'm her grandmother. But I can't. I'll never be able to, because I'm dying. Leo, I've known for 6 months. Cancer. It started in my lungs. Too many years of breathing car exhaust and campfire smoke, the doctor said. And it's spreading. I could get treatment, but treatment means hospitals and records and questions I can't answer. Your father wants me to come home. Wants me to spend my last months in a real bed, with real care. But I can't risk it. Philip Carver got out of prison last year. Your father checked, and he's living in Pittsburgh now. Still connected to the old network. Still dangerous. I won't risk Ruby. I won't risk you. I won't risk Catherine, so I'll stay here in my woods, in my car. Your father visits every few days. He brings me medicine for the pain. He holds my hand and tells me about Ruby, about you, about the life I'm missing. We made our choice together all those years ago. And we're seeing it through to the end. I'm not afraid of dying, Leo. I'm only afraid you'll never know how much I loved you. That's why I'm making these tapes, writing these letters, so that someday when you're ready, you'll understand. The car is parked on land I bought in 1984. It's in your father's name now. He'll explain when the time is right. Maybe you'll find it. Maybe you'll come to this quiet place and hear my voice, and know that I never stopped being your mother. Watch over Ruby the way I watched over you. Love her fiercely. Protect her always. And tell her about me if you can. Tell her she had a grandmother who loved her from a distance. Goodbye, my sweet boy. You made my life worth living, all my love forever. Mom Martin's hands shook as he finished reading. Ruby was crying silently beside him, and he pulled her close. She saw me, Ruby whispered. She saw me at the park. Yes, Martin said, his own voice thick. She did. They sat together in the quiet camper, holding each other, processing the weight of love that had survived everything, distance, time, even death itself. Martin woke the next morning with gritty eyes and a headache that pulsed behind his temples. Ruby was still asleep, curled under her blanket with one hand tucked beneath her cheek. He watched her for a moment, thinking about his mother, watching him the same way from a distance, memorizing details she could never be part of. He made coffee on the camping stove, the familiar ritual grounding him. The journal sat on the table where he'd left it, and he picked it up, reading entries at random. March 12th, 1985, found a stream today, clear and cold. I can wash my hair, my clothes. Small victories. I'm learning to measure my life in small victories. A warm day, a good parking spot where no one can see me. A week without nightmares. Leo lost his first tooth. His father brought me the tooth fairy money to reimburse. 25 cents. I cried over a quarter because I couldn't be the one to slip it under his pillow. October 8th, 1987. Saw a dark sedan parked on Leo's street today. Same make and model as the ones Philip's people used to drive. Waited 4 hours watching. Finally, a woman came out, just someone visiting a neighbor. But my heart didn't stop racing for the rest of the day. This is what my life is now. Constant vigilance, constant fear, and the worst part is not knowing if I'm being paranoid or prudent. June 15th, 1990, Leo's father and I renewed our vows today. Just the two of us, standing in a clearing in these woods, speaking the words we spoke 16 years ago. No officiant, no witnesses, no legal standing. But it felt real. It felt like we were choosing each other all over again. He kissed me, and I tasted salt from both our tears. This is not the marriage either of us imagined, but it's ours. And that has to be enough. Martin set the journal down carefully. His parents had renewed their vows in secret, in these very woods. The marriage everyone thought had ended in abandonment had actually continued, hidden but real. The fourth tape. He'd been avoiding it, knowing it would be the last. The final words his mother had left for him. Ruby emerged, hair tangled, rubbing her eyes. Morning, Dad. Morning, sweetheart. Hungry? They made breakfast together. Oatmeal with honey from Mrs. Kimball's preserves. As they ate, Ruby said, "We should listen to the last tape today." "I know. Are you scared?" Martin considered the question. "A little. Once I hear it, that's all there is. No more answers waiting. But you'll have the answers you already got," Ruby said with a child's logic. "That doesn't go away." She was right, of course. He was stalling, trying to stretch out the mystery, because once it was solved, he'd have to decide what to do with what he knew. After breakfast, they walked to the library in town. Martin had realized something during the night. He needed to verify what his mother had said about Philip Carver. Needed to know if the threat had truly ended. The librarian recognized him from his previous visit. "Back again? You researching something specific?" "Local history," Martin said vaguely. He pulled up the archives again, searching for Philip Carver. The obituary information had been incomplete before. Now he dug deeper, finding court records, parole hearings, recent addresses. Philip Carver had been released from prison in 2015. He'd lived in Pittsburgh for 3 years, then moved to a nursing facility in 2018 following a stroke. According to the facility's website, which Martin found through a painstaking search, Philip was in the memory care unit. Martin called the facility from the library's courtesy phone. "I'm trying to locate information about a resident," he said when someone answered. "Philip Carver? Are you family?" "No, it's complicated. I'm trying to determine if he's still living there." A pause. Sir, I can't give out patient information to non-family members. I understand. Can you at least tell me if he's still alive? Another pause. Mr. Carver is a resident here, yes. But as I said, I can't provide details. That's all I needed to know. Thank you. Martin hung up. Philip Carver was alive but incapacitated, locked away in his failing mind. The threat that had defined his mother's life for 15 years was essentially neutralized. She could have come home. Could have revealed herself years ago after Philip's stroke. Could have met Ruby as a grandmother instead of a distant observer, but she hadn't known. She died in 1999, believing the danger was still real. The waste of it hit Martin like a physical blow. All those years of sacrifice, and in the end, it had been for nothing. Or not nothing. She'd kept him safe, kept Ruby safe. But the price had been so much higher than it needed to be. Ruby was in the children's section, reading a picture book. Martin collected her, and they drove back in silence. At the camper, Martin found a newspaper clipping tucked into the journal. He hadn't noticed it before. The paper was yellowed, dated June 1984. It showed a photograph of several men being led from a courthouse in handcuffs. The caption identified them as members of an organized crime ring. In the background of the photo, almost out of frame, stood a man in a suit. Someone had circled him in faded ink. Martin peered closer at the grainy image. Vincent Carver. It had to be. The man his mother had almost married. Martin studied the face, handsome in a sharp way, confident even in the midst of scandal. This was the man who'd drawn his mother in, who'd seemed like a fairy tale before revealing himself as a nightmare. Is that him? Ruby asked, looking over his shoulder. I think so. He doesn't look that scary. That's the thing about dangerous people, Martin said. They rarely look like what they are. That afternoon, they returned to the car in the woods. Martin had decided they should clean it, preserve it properly. It was a memorial, after all, to his mother's sacrifice, to his father's loyalty, to a love that had survived impossible circumstances. They worked together, Ruby wiping down the interior with damp cloths while Martin tackled the exterior, scrubbing away years of moss and grime. The car revealed itself gradually, faded blue paint, chrome bumpers dulled but intact, windows that cleared to show their original transparency. In the glove compartment, Ruby found the silver locket they'd discovered before. She opened it, studying the photo of baby Martin and the lock of his hair. "Can I keep this?" she asked. "To remember her." Martin's throat tightened. "Yes, she'd want you to have it." Ruby fastened it around her neck. The locket caught the filtered sunlight coming through the trees, and Martin thought about how his mother had carried this with her for 15 years, had opened it and looked at his baby picture when she needed to remember why she'd chosen exile. They found other items as they cleaned, a hairbrush, a paperback novel with a bookmark still marking the place she'd stopped reading, a blanket folded in the back seat, worn thin from use, evidence of a life lived small and quiet. Every possession carefully chosen and maintained. "Did she sleep in here?" Ruby asked, touching the blanket. "Sometimes, I think. The journal mentions a cabin too. It must have collapsed by now. Can we look for it?" They searched the area around the car, pushing through undergrowth, following what might have been old paths. About 100 yards from the car, they found it, or what remained of it. Foundation stones marked where a tiny structure had stood. A rusted wood stove lay on its side, consumed by vines. Shards of glass from a window. A metal frame that might have been a bed. She lived here, Martin said, the reality of it settling over him. This was her home. Ruby knelt by the foundation, running her fingers over the stones. "It's sad. Yes, but also kind of brave. Living out here all alone, just to keep you safe." Martin nodded, unable to speak. His daughter understood what had taken him 47 years to comprehend, that his mother's absence had been an act of love, not abandonment. They marked the cabin site with a cairn of stones, stacking them carefully. A memorial for a memorial, a way of saying, "We see you, we know what you did, we honor it." As they walked back to the camper, Ruby said, "We should listen to the last tape tonight." "Okay," Martin agreed. "Together." That evening, after dinner, after the sun had set and the forest had gone quiet, they sat side by side on the bench. Martin held the fourth tape, the final message his mother had left. He pressed play, static. Then his mother's voice, weaker than in the other recordings, roughened by illness. "Leo, my dear, sweet Leo, if you're hearing this, then I'm gone. And you've found everything I left for you. I hope it helps. I hope it explains. I hope it makes the pain of my absence hurt a little less, a cough, wet and painful. Your father is with me as I record this. It's December 1998. I have maybe a few weeks left, the doctor says. Though what doctor, you might ask? A retired veterinarian your father found, someone who treats people who can't go to hospitals for one reason or another. He's kind. He gives me morphine for the pain." Another cough. "I want to tell you about the day you were born," Martin's mother's voice continued, each word an effort. "The day you were born, Leo. I thought my heart would burst from happiness. You came 3 weeks early, and I was terrified. Terrified something would be wrong, that I'd lose you before I even got to know you. But you were perfect. 6 pounds, 4 ounces. 10 fingers, 10 toes. And when the nurse put you in my arms, you opened your eyes and looked right at me. A pause filled with labored breathing. Your father was there. He held my hand through the whole thing, even though he was scared too. I could see it in his eyes. But he was strong for me, the way he's always been strong for me. After they cleaned you up and weighed you, he held you and cried. Big silent tears running down his face. He said, 'We made something perfect.' And we did, Leo, we did." Ruby squeezed Martin's hand. He couldn't look at her, couldn't do anything but listen. "I had 7 years with you. 7 years of being your mother in the normal way, making your breakfast, kissing your scraped knees, reading you bedtime stories. 7 years of being a family. And then it ended, and I had to become your mother from a distance. Do you know how many times I almost broke? How many times I almost said to hell with safety, I'm coming home. The sound of crying, soft and broken. Your father stopped me every time. Reminded me what was at stake. Reminded me that loving you meant protecting you, even when protection looked like abandonment. He was right. He was always right. But God, Leo, it hurt. It hurt every single day." A long pause. Martin heard his father's voice in the background, indistinct, comforting. "Your father wants me to tell you about the land. The property where you found this car. I bought it in 1984 with money your father gave me. Paid cash, used my maiden name. It was supposed to be temporary, just until things settled. But years passed, and it became permanent. After I'm gone, your father will make sure it passes to you. It's yours, Leo. This piece of earth where I spent 15 years watching over you. It's my gift to you." Another coughing fit, longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm tired, Leo. So tired. But I need to say a few more things before I can't anymore. First, don't be angry at your father. Every lie he told was an act of love. He carried this burden so you wouldn't have to, and it cost him everything. He's the best man I've ever known, and I'm grateful every day that I found him." Martin thought of his father. Quiet, steady, gone 5 years now. All that time, he'd been carrying this weight alone. Second, forgive me. I know it's a lot to ask. I know you have every right to be angry. But please know that every choice I made for you. You were loved, Leo, fiercely, completely, always. His mother's breathing grew more ragged. Third, if you have children someday, love them the way I loved you. Be present in their lives. Don't let anything take that from you. You'll understand then what I did and why. You'll understand that a parent's love is both the strongest and most painful thing in the world. A long silence. Martin thought the tape had ended, but then his mother spoke again. "I see you in my dreams, Leo. I see you grown up, happy, with a family of your own. I see you living the life I wanted for you, safe, loved, free. And in my dreams I'm there too, holding your children, being the grandmother I can never be in real life. Those dreams are what keep me going on the hard days." Her voice broke completely. "I wish I could have known your children. Leo, I wish I could have been there for your wedding, your graduations, all the moments I missed. I wish I could have grown old, watching you grow old. But wishing doesn't change anything. This is what I have, these tapes, these letters, this car full of memories and regrets. Martin heard his father's voice again, clearer this time. Rest now, love. You've said enough, his mother. Just one more thing. A deep breath gathering strength. Leo, you are proof that love survives everything. Distance, time, sacrifice, even death. You are the best thing I ever did. And if I had to choose again, knowing what it would cost, knowing I'd die alone in a car in the woods, I would still choose to protect you. Every time, without hesitation. A rustling sound, as if she was adjusting position. Your father is going to bury me near the cabin. Nothing fancy, just a quiet spot under the trees. Maybe someday you'll find it. Maybe you'll stand there and know that I'm at peace. That I did what I set out to do. I kept you safe. Her breathing slowed, each word harder than the last. Live well, my son. Love deeply. Be happy. And when you think of me, don't think of the woman who left. Think of the mother who loved you enough to let you go. That's who I was. That's who I'll always be. A final pause. Goodbye, Leo. Thank you for being my son. It was the greatest honor of my life. The tape clicked off. Martin sat frozen, tears streaming down his face. Ruby was crying too, holding onto him like he was the only solid thing in a shifting world. Outside, night had fully fallen. The forest was dark beyond their windows, full of shadows and secrets now revealed. After a long time, Ruby spoke. Where did your dad bury her? I don't know. Somewhere near the cabin, she said. Can we look tomorrow? Martin nodded. Yes, we'll look. They sat together until the tears stopped, until the weight of what they'd heard settled into something they could carry. Then Martin tucked Ruby into bed, kissed her forehead, and sat at the table with his mother's journal. He read until dawn, learning his mother's life through her own words. The entries grew shorter as the months passed, sentences fragmenting as illness took hold. November 1998, can't write much anymore. Hands shake too badly. But I wanted to record this. Leo came to visit his father yesterday. They had coffee at the diner where we used to meet. I watched from my car. Leo looks good, healthy, happy. That's all I ever wanted. December 1998 final entry. Too weak to write more. Made the tapes. Made sure everything is organized. Your father will handle the rest. Leo, if you're reading this, know that my last thoughts were of you. Always you. The handwriting was barely legible, shaking across the page like a seismograph recording an earthquake. Martin closed the journal gently. His father had buried his mother somewhere in these woods. Had visited her grave in secret all those years, had died without ever telling Martin the truth, honoring his wife's wishes to the end. The next morning, Martin and Ruby searched the area around the cabin ruins. It took 3 hours, but they found it, a small cairn of stones carefully stacked, partially overgrown with moss. No marker, no name, just stones holding their shape against time. Martin knelt beside it. Ruby stood at his shoulder. Hi, Mom, he said quietly. It's me, Leo, though everyone calls me Martin now, middle name. I found your car, found your letters, your tapes, everything. And I want you to know I understand. I forgive you, and I wish I could have told you that before you died. His voice broke. I wish you could have met Catherine, my wife. She died 2 years ago, cancer like you. You would have loved her, and she would have loved you. Ruby knelt beside him. Hi, Grandma. I'm Ruby. I'm your granddaughter. I never met you, but I feel like I know you now. Thank you for keeping my dad safe. Thank you for loving him so much. They sat there for a long time, 3 generations connected across time and death. The forest was quiet around them, peaceful. Finally, Martin stood. We should mark this properly. She deserves that. Over the next week, they worked on the memorial. Martin drove to town and commissioned a simple headstone. Nothing fancy. Just granite with words carved deep. Anne Morrison Fletcher, 1950-1999, beloved wife and mother guardian from afar. When the stone was placed, when the area around the grave was cleared and planted with wildflowers from Mrs. Kimball's garden, Martin stood back and surveyed their work. She'd like this, Ruby said. Yes, Martin agreed. She would. Mrs. Kimball visited that afternoon, brought fresh bread and stayed for tea. She studied the changes they'd made, the path to the memorial, the restored car visible through the trees. "You found what you were looking for," she said. "It wasn't a question. I found my mother," Martin replied. Mrs. Kimball nodded. "And what will you do now?" It was a good question. What did you do after solving a mystery that had haunted you for 40 years? How did you move forward when the past had finally revealed itself? "I think," Martin said slowly, "we'll stay here. Build something permanent. This land was hers and now it's ours. Seems right to make it home," Ruby beamed. "Really we can stay?" "Really." That night, lying on his narrow bench while Ruby slept, Martin thought about his mother's final words. "You are proof that love survives everything." She'd been right. Love had survived her absence, his father's silence, 40 years of unanswered questions. Love had brought him here to this quiet place, where he could finally understand the sacrifice that had shaped his entire life. Tomorrow, he'd start planning their house. Something small but solid built near the memorial. A home where Ruby could grow up surrounded by forest and peace, where the past wasn't hidden but honored. His mother had given him this land, this legacy. The least he could do was build something worthy of her sacrifice. 2 weeks later, Martin and Ruby were working on the car, determined to restore it as best they could. It had become their project, something they did together each afternoon after Ruby finished her schoolwork. She'd enrolled in online classes and thrived with the flexible schedule. Ruby was underneath the chassis, checking for structural damage, when her hand brushed against something that didn't belong. A small box, magnetic, stuck to the undercarriage. "Dad!" she called. "There's something here." Martin slid under beside her. His fingers found the box, metal about the size of a deck of cards, held in place by a strong magnet. He pulled it free, and they crawled out into the sunlight. The box was newer than the car by decades. Not rusted, relatively clean. Martin's heart rate picked up. Inside was another voice recorder, digital this time, not cassette, and a small brass key attached to a paper tag with an address written in his father's handwriting. Martin stared at the recorder. His father's handwriting? His father had been here, had hidden this. "What is it?" Ruby asked. "I don't know yet." His hands trembled as he pressed play. His father's voice filled the clearing, and Martin's breath caught. He hadn't heard that voice in 5 years, hadn't realized how much he'd missed it. "Son, if you're hearing this, then you found your mother's car. You know the truth about why she left. And now I need to tell you the rest. The rest." There was more. "I found your mother 6 months after she disappeared. She made me promise not to tell you, and I kept that promise. But there's something she didn't tell you in her tapes, something she made me swear I'd never reveal. I'm breaking that promise now because you deserve the whole truth." Martin sat heavily on the ground, Ruby beside him. "Your mother and I stayed married in every way that mattered. I visited her once a month, sometimes more. We'd sit in this car, or later in the cabin she built, and we'd talk for hours. About you, about our life, about everything we were missing. It wasn't the marriage we'd planned, but it was ours." A pause, Martin's father collecting his thoughts. "In 1990, we renewed our vows. Right here in these woods, just the two of us. No efficient, no legal document. But it was real, son. More real than most marriages I've seen. We chose each other again, knowing what it cost, knowing it would never be normal." Martin's vision blurred. His parents had maintained their marriage in secret for 15 years. "When your mother got sick in 1998, I wanted to bring her home. Put her in a hospital, get her real treatment. She refused. Said Philip Carver had gotten out of prison, that the risk was too high. I argued with her for weeks, but she was stubborn. You get that from her." A sound like a sad laugh. "So I took care of her here. Found a retired veterinarian who agreed to help, paid him in cash. He gave her morphine for the pain, made her as comfortable as he could. And I was with her at the end, holding her hand, telling her it was okay to let go." Martin heard his father's voice break. "I buried her near the cabin," said the words, sang her favorite hymn. "Then I came back every month to visit her grave, to tell her about you, about your life. When you got married, I told her about Catherine. When Ruby was born, I brought photos. Your mother missed your life, but she never stopped being part of it." Another pause, longer this time. "Here's what I need you to know, son. After Philip Carver's stroke in 2018, yes, I checked on him every year, I realized your mother could have come home. The threat was gone. She died believing it was still real, but it wasn't, and that knowledge has haunted me every day since I found out. Martin's chest tightened. She sacrificed everything to keep you safe from a danger that ended years before she died. If she'd known, if she'd waited just one more year, she could have come home. Could have met Catherine, held Ruby, been your mother again. The weight of it was crushing. His mother had died unnecessarily. All that suffering, all that sacrifice for a threat that no longer existed. But here's what I've come to understand, his father continued. She made the choice she thought was right with the information she had. That's all any of us can do. And she kept you safe, son. She kept you and Ruby safe. That wasn't for nothing. A deep breath. The key in this box opens a safety deposit box at First National Bank in Pittsburgh. The address is on the tag. Inside are things your mother wanted you to have. Photos I took over the years, documents about the land, some money she'd saved. And one more thing I recorded for you. A video, your mother's last days. I filmed it because I hoped you might want to see her face one more time, hear her voice in real time, not just on tape. Martin's father's voice grew softer. I'm sorry I lied to you all those years. I'm sorry I let you grow up thinking your mother abandoned you. But I'd do it again, son, because that's what your mother and I agreed was best. We chose your happiness over our own, your safety over our comfort. And if that was wrong, then I'll answer for it someday. A final pause. I love you, Leo. Your mother loved you. We both loved you more than you'll ever know, at least until you have to make an impossible choice for Ruby. Then you'll understand. Take care of that little girl. She's our legacy, yours and Catherine's and mine and your mother's. She's proof that love continues, that sacrifice means something. The recording ended. Martin sat in stunned silence. Ruby was crying quietly beside him. His father had known for years that his mother's sacrifice had been unnecessary in the end, had carried that knowledge alone, just as he'd carried everything else alone. Dad, Ruby whispered. There's a video of her? Martin looked at the key in his hand. A safety deposit box in Pittsburgh, 3 hours away. Inside, his mother's face, moving and speaking. The closest thing to meeting her he'd ever have. No, we need to go, he said. Tomorrow. We'll drive to Pittsburgh. That night, Martin couldn't sleep. He thought about timing, about how 1 year could have changed everything. If Philip Carver had his stroke in 1997 instead of 2018, if his mother had held on just a little longer. But she hadn't known, had died believing she was still protecting him. And maybe he thought that was the point. She'd lived with purpose, died with purpose. Her sacrifice hadn't been in vain. It had given him a safe, normal childhood. The fact that the danger ended before she didn't erase what she'd accomplished. Still, the waste of it hurt. The unnecessary years of suffering. The missed opportunities for reconciliation. Ruby appeared beside his bench. Can't sleep either. No, she climbed up beside him. Are you mad at your dad for not telling you? Martin considered. I don't know what I am. Sad, mostly. Sad for all of them. My mom, my dad, even me and you. So much loss that didn't have to happen. But some good happened too, Ruby said. We found this place. We learned about her. We know now that she loved you. Martin pulled his daughter close. When did you get so wise? I pay attention, she said simply. They sat together in the darkness, planning their trip to Pittsburgh, to the final pieces of the puzzle his parents had left behind. The drive to Pittsburgh took 3 hours through winding Pennsylvania roads. Ruby sat in the passenger seat, the brass key clutched in her hand like a talisman. Martin drove in silence, his mind cycling through everything he'd learned, everything he still didn't know. Tell me about Mom again, Ruby said as they passed through a small town. Its main street lined with brick buildings that had stood for a century or more. Martin glanced at her, surprised. Catherine. Yeah, what would she think about all this? Martin smiled despite his nerves. She'd be fascinated. Your mother loved mysteries, loved piecing things together. She did jigsaw puzzles when she couldn't sleep, remember? 1,000 pieces, sometimes more. Ruby nodded. I remember. She'd let me help with the edges, She'd have wanted to hear every tape, read every letter. She'd probably have made a timeline on the wall, connecting everything. Martin's throat tightened. And she'd have understood why my mother did what she did. Catherine was fierce about protecting you. She'd have done the same. They drove in comfortable silence for a while, the landscape changing from rural to suburban as they approached Pittsburgh. Martin thought about Catherine's final months, how she'd made him promise to give Ruby a good life, to not let grief consume them both. "I think she'd be proud of us," Ruby said quietly, "for coming here, for finding out the truth." "I think so too." The bank was downtown, an old stone building with marble columns and brass fixtures polished to a mirror shine. Martin parked, and they stood on the sidewalk for a moment, both gathering courage. "Ready?" he asked. Ruby nodded, still clutching the key. Inside, the bank was hushed, voices echoing softly off high ceilings. Martin approached the desk, explained his situation to a woman with silver hair and kind eyes. She examined the key, checked his identification, confirmed his relationship to the account holder. "Your father set this up in 2002, she said, "with very specific instructions. You're authorized to access it. Follow me, please." She led them to a private room, small and windowless, with a table and 2 chairs. A few minutes later, she returned with a metal box, set it on the table, and left them alone. Martin stared at the box. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. Ruby put her small hand over his. "Together, remember?" He nodded, inserted the key and opened the box. Inside were layers of his life, documented by his father's patient hands. Photographs, hundreds of them, organized chronologically in albums. Martin as a baby, Martin as a child. School pictures, baseball games, birthday parties. His high school graduation, his wedding, Ruby's birth and early years. But these weren't the photos he'd grown up with. These were different angles, taken from a distance, slightly out of focus. His mother's copies, the ones she'd looked at during her exile. Ruby picked up one album, opened it carefully. "Look, Dad, that's you and Mom on your wedding day." Martin took the album. There he was, younger, happier, standing beside Catherine in her white dress. The photo was taken from the back of the church, his mother's vantage point. In the margin, his mother's handwriting, "My son married a beautiful woman today." "I cried through the whole ceremony." "She really was there," Ruby whispered. They found photos of Ruby as a baby, as a toddler. His mother had watched his daughter grow up the same way she'd watched him, from careful distance, memorizing moments she couldn't be part of. Beneath the albums were documents, the deed to the property, signed over to Martin. His mother's will handwritten and notarized. A savings account passbook showing deposits his father had made monthly for 17 years. Money his mother had saved, now Martin's inheritance. And at the bottom, a USB drive in a plastic case, labeled in his father's handwriting, "For Leo, your mother's final message." Martin picked it up. The small drive, weighing almost nothing but feeling impossibly heavy. "There's a laptop in the car," he said. "We can watch it there or wait until we get home." "Here," Ruby said firmly. "We came all this way. We should watch it here." Martin retrieved the laptop from the car. Back in the private room, he inserted the drive with shaking hands. One video file. He clicked play, the screen filled with his mother's face. She was in the car, propped against pillows, wrapped in blankets. Her face was gaunt, eyes hollow, but she was smiling. His father's voice came from behind the camera. "Ready, love. Ready." His mother looked directly at the camera, directly at Martin across nearly 3 decades, and began to speak. "Hello, Leo. Look at me. I wanted you to see my face, to hear my voice in real time, not just on tape. I'm recording this in November 1998. I have maybe a few weeks left." She paused, gathering strength. "I've been thinking about what I want to say to you. Your father says I should tell you I don't regret it, that I'd make the same choices again. And that's true, but it's not the whole truth." Her eyes filled with tears. "The whole truth is that I regret every moment I missed with you. Every birthday, every Christmas, every ordinary Tuesday when I could have been making you breakfast, but instead I was watching you from a car window. I regret that you grew up thinking I didn't love you. I regret that I'll never meet your children, never hold your hand when you need me, never be the mother I wanted to be." She wiped her eyes with a shaking hand. "But I don't regret keeping you safe. Even knowing what it cost, even knowing I'll die alone, I don't regret that. Because you're alive, Leo. You're healthy and happy and whole. And that's worth everything." Anne's face filled the screen, her smile sad but genuine. She shifted against the pillows, and Martin could see his father's hand enter the frame briefly, adjusting the blanket around her shoulders. "Let me tell you about the day you were born," she said, her voice soft but clear. "It was March 15th, 1977. I'd been having contractions all morning, but I didn't want to go to the hospital too early. Your father was nervous. He'd never been around babies much. He kept asking if I was sure it was time, if maybe we should call the doctor again." She laughed, a sound that broke Martin's heart. "By noon, the contractions were 5 minutes apart, and your father practically carried me to the car. He drove so carefully, like I was made of glass. Kept apologizing every time we hit a bump in the road. I was in labor, and he was apologizing for the potholes." Ruby leaned against Martin, watching intently. "You came at 6:43 in the evening. 7 hours of labor, which the nurses said was pretty good for a first baby. And when they put you in my arms," Anne's voice broke, "when they put you in my arms, Leo, I understood for the first time what unconditional love meant. I looked at your tiny face, and I knew I would do anything to keep you safe." She paused, wiping tears from her cheeks. "Your father was crying too. Big tough construction worker, crying like a baby himself. He held you so gently, like he was afraid you'd break. And he whispered, we're going to give him everything. Everything we didn't have. And we tried, Leo. For 7 years, we tried." The camera shifted slightly as Martin's father adjusted position. "I want to tell you about those 7 years," Anne continued, "because I need you to know they were real. That wasn't a lie or a performance. That was us being a family. Your first words, your first steps, your first day of kindergarten, those were the happiest years of my life. Every single day with you was a gift." She coughed, the sound wet and painful. Martin's father's voice came from off-camera. "Rest a moment, love." Anne shook her head. "I need to finish this." She looked back at the camera, directly at Martin. "When I had to leave, it destroyed something in me. Your father will tell you I was strong, that I handled it well. But the truth is I fell apart. For months I could barely function. I'd sit in this car and cry until I had no tears left. I'd drive to your school and watch you on the playground, and it took everything in me not to run to you." Her hands twisted the blanket in her lap. "Your father kept me going. He visited every week, brought me photos and stories. He'd tell me what you said at dinner, what you drew in art class, how you lost a tooth or scraped your knee. He kept me connected to you when I couldn't be there myself. Without him, I wouldn't have survived those first years." The video flickered slightly, a technical glitch. "I want you to know about your father, Leo. People thought he was simple, quiet. But he was the strongest person I ever knew. He raised you alone, worked full days, kept our secret, and still found time to visit me once a month. He gave up so much. He could have remarried, had a normal life. But he chose to stay faithful to a wife who couldn't come home. That's the kind of man your father was." Anne's breathing grew more labored. "I know what you're thinking right now. You're thinking, why didn't she just come home? Why didn't she risk it? And maybe I should have. Maybe I was too afraid, too cautious. But Leo, I saw what those men were capable of. I saw the violence in their eyes when they realized I'd witnessed their business. And I couldn't risk them finding you." She leaned forward slightly, intense despite her weakness. "Philip Carver was released from prison in 2015. Your father told me. By then I was already sick, already dying. But even if I'd been healthy, I wouldn't have risked coming back. Because men like Philip don't forget, don't forgive. They wait. And I wasn't going to let you be the price of my selfishness." The irony wasn't lost on Martin. Philip had his stroke 3 years after this recording, ending the threat permanently. But his mother had died, never knowing that. "If I could change one thing," Anne said quietly, "it would be to tell you myself. To sit you down when you were old enough to understand and explain everything. But your father and I agreed it was safer if you didn't know. Safer if you could be angry at me, blame me, move on with your life without the weight of this secret." She coughed again, longer this time. Martin's father appeared on screen, helping her drink water from a straw. "I'm tired," Anne said when she could speak again. "But there's one more thing I need to say." She looked directly into the camera, her eyes fierce despite her deteriorating body. "You have a daughter now, Leo, Ruby. I've seen her. Your father brings me photos. She's beautiful. She has your eyes and Catherine's smile. And someday you're going to understand what I did, because you'd do the same for her. You'd sacrifice anything to keep her safe. That's what parents do. That's what love is." Her eyes closed briefly, exhaustion overwhelming her. "When you watch this, I'll be gone, and you'll have questions that can't be answered. But know this, I loved you every day of my life. I thought about you every morning when I woke up and every night before I slept. You were my first thought and my last thought always." The video showed Martin's father's hand reaching out, touching Anne's shoulder gently. "It's okay, love," he said softly. "You can rest now." Anne opened her eyes one more time. "Goodbye, my sweet boy. Be happy. That's all I ever wanted for you." The screen went dark. Martin sat frozen, staring at the blank screen where his mother's face had been moments before. Beside him, Ruby was crying quietly, tears streaming down her cheeks. The private room felt impossibly small, the walls pressing in. Martin couldn't breathe properly, couldn't think past the crushing weight of what he'd just witnessed. "Dad," Ruby whispered. "She looked like you." It was true. Even gaunt from illness, even tired and worn, his mother's face held echoes of his own, the same eyes, the same shape to the mouth. He'd spent 40 years wondering what she looked like, and now he knew the video file had a second clip. Martin's finger hovered over the play button. "There's more," he said. Ruby nodded, wiping her eyes. "We have to watch it." Martin clicked play. The scene was the same, his mother in the car wrapped in blankets, but this recording was different. The camera was steadier, positioned on something rather than handheld, and his mother was holding a piece of paper. "Leo," she began, her voice even weaker than before. "This is my last recording. Your father is here, but he's letting me do this part alone. I want to show you something." She held up the paper. Written in shaky handwriting were the words, "You are proof that love survives everything. I wrote this yesterday," Anne said. "I've been thinking about what legacy means, what I'm leaving behind. And I realized, you are my legacy, Leo, not these tapes, not these letters. You, the fact that you exist, that you grew up safe and loved and whole. That's everything." She lowered the paper, set it aside carefully. "I want to talk about Catherine. I never met her, but I watched her from afar the same way I watched you. And Leo, she was remarkable. The way she looked at you, the way she held Ruby. She loved you both so much. I'm grateful you found her. Grateful you had that love." Anne's hands trembled as she adjusted her blankets. "Your father told me Catherine is sick now. Cancer. I'm so sorry, my son. I wish I could be there for you, help you through it. But since I can't, I want to tell you this. Grief is not something you get over. It's something you learn to carry. And you'll carry Catherine's loss the same way your father carried mine. With dignity, with love, with the knowledge that what you had was real and precious." The prescience of her words hit Martin hard. She died in 1999, 3 years before Catherine even got sick. But she'd understood the shape of loss, the weight of it. "When Catherine passes," Anne continued, "remember that Ruby will need you more than ever. She'll need you to be strong even when you don't feel strong. She'll need you to show her that life continues, that love continues, even after loss. Can you do that for her? For me?" Martin felt Ruby's hand slip into his, squeezing tight. "I need to tell you something about your father," Anne said, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "Something he made me promise never to reveal. But I'm breaking that promise now because you deserve to know." She paused, gathering strength. "After I left, your father had opportunities to move on. Women who were interested, who could have given him a normal life. He turned them all down. When people asked why he never remarried, he'd say he wasn't interested. But the truth is he was already married, to me. In every way that mattered, we stayed married until the day I died. Tears rolled down Anne's cheeks. We renewed our vows in 1990, here in these woods. No efficient, no legal document, just the two of us and our promises to each other. Your father said the same words he said on our wedding day. I choose you. In good times and bad, in presence and absence, I choose you. And he meant it, Leo. Every single day he chose me. Chose us. The camera caught Martin's father's hand, reaching into frame, taking Anne's hand in his. That's what love looks like, Anne said, gripping his hand tightly. Not the easy romance in movies. Real love is choosing someone even when it's hard, even when they can't be with you, even when the whole world thinks you should move on. Your father taught me that, and I hope you'll teach Ruby that. She looked directly into the camera, her eyes burning with intensity despite her weakness. I'm not afraid of dying, Leo. I made my peace with it months ago. What I'm afraid of is that you'll remember me as the mother who left, the mother who wasn't there. But I was there. Every baseball game, every graduation, every important moment, I was there, watching from the shadows. And I want you to remember me like that. Not as an absence, but as a presence you couldn't see. Anne's breathing grew ragged. Martin's father's voice, off camera. That's enough, love. You need to rest. But Anne shook her head stubbornly. One more thing. The note I showed you. You are proof that love survives everything. I want you to keep it. Frame it, put it somewhere you'll see it every day. Because it's true, Leo. Love survives absence and distance and death. It survives everything. You survived. And that means love won. She smiled, weak but genuine. Goodbye, my sweet boy. Thank you for being my son. Thank you for being proof that everything I sacrificed meant something. I love you. I'll always love you. The video ended for the final time. Martin closed the laptop slowly, his hands shaking. Beside him, Ruby was sobbing openly now, and he pulled her into his arms, holding her as they both cried. In the small, quiet room of the bank, surrounded by the carefully preserved evidence of his mother's love, Martin finally understood. His mother hadn't abandoned him. She'd been there all along, an invisible guardian, sacrificing her presence so he could have his safety. The waste of it still hurt. The unnecessary years of separation, the missed opportunities. But beneath that hurt was something else, gratitude. His mother had loved him enough to let him go, and his father had loved them both enough to carry that secret alone. Dad, Ruby said eventually, her voice muffled against his chest. Can we take the note home? The one she showed on the video. Martin opened the box again, searching through the papers. There at the very bottom was a small envelope marked for Leo. Inside, the note his mother had held up to the camera. Her handwriting shaky but clear. You are proof that love survives everything. Yes, Martin said, his voice thick. We'll frame it. Put it where we can see it every day. They gathered everything carefully, the albums, the documents, the note, and packed them back in the box. Martin carried it out like it was made of glass, precious and fragile and irreplaceable. 3 months later, autumn painted the Pennsylvania woods in shades of gold and crimson. Martin stood on the porch of their new cabin, small but solid, built with his own hands, on the foundation of his mother's land, and watched Ruby playing near the memorial garden. They'd transformed the area around the car and his mother's grave into something beautiful. Wildflowers bloomed between carefully placed stones. A carved wooden bench sat facing the headstone. The car itself had been fully restored, not to running condition but to dignity. Cleaned, painted, preserved as the monument it had always been. Ruby knelt beside the grave, talking quietly. She did this often, telling her grandmother about school, about the friends she'd made, about the life they were building here. Martin never interrupted these conversations. They seemed important, sacred even. A granddaughter getting to know the grandmother she'd never met. Mrs. Kimball's car rolled up the newly gravelled driveway. She'd become a fixture in their lives, more grandmother than neighbor, teaching Ruby to bake and garden while sharing stories of her own long life. Brought apple pie, she called, climbing out with a covered dish. Fresh this morning. You spoil us, Martin said, but he took the pie gratefully. Inside the cabin, they'd created a small museum corner. The wedding dress hung in a glass-fronted cabinet Martin had built. The letters were arranged chronologically in frames along one wall. The voice recorder sat on a shelf, silent now but preserved. And above the mantel, in a simple wooden frame, hung his mother's note, "You are proof that love survives everything." Ruby bounded in, cheeks flushed from the cool air. "Mrs. Kimball, did you bring pie?" "Apple, your favorite. Go wash your hands." While Ruby washed up, Mrs. Kimball studied the wall of letters. She'd heard the whole story by now, had cried with them over the tragedy and beauty of it. "Your mother would be proud," she said quietly to Martin. "What you've built here." "I hope so." They ate pie at the small dining table Martin had crafted from local oak. Ruby chattered about the essay she was writing for her online class, about family, about sacrifice, about understanding that love sometimes looks like absence. After Mrs. Kimball left, Martin and Ruby walked to the memorial, as they did most evenings. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. They sat on the bench, shoulder to shoulder, comfortable in the silence. "I've been thinking," Ruby said eventually, "about Mom, about how she and Grandma both had to leave, just in different ways." Martin nodded. "Cancer took your mother. Fear took mine. But they both loved us fiercely, and you're still here. So we're okay." "We're okay," Martin agreed. A breeze moved through the trees, rattling the leaves in their autumnal dryness. Martin thought about his mother sitting in this same spot, watching the seasons change, measuring her life in stolen glimpses of his. "Dad?" Ruby's voice was soft. "Do you think she knows? That we found everything that we understand?" Martin looked at the headstone, at the carefully tended flowers, at the car that had been both prison and sanctuary. "I think if love survives everything, then yes. Somewhere, somehow, she knows." Ruby leaned against him, and he put his arm around her shoulders. They sat that way as darkness fell, as stars emerged one by one overhead. Inside the cabin later, Martin opened his journal. He'd started keeping one after reading his mother's, documenting their life here for Ruby to have someday. He wrote about the day, about Mrs. Kimball's visit, about Ruby's essay. And then he wrote, "Today I realized I've been carrying my mother's love my whole life. I just didn't know it. She was there in every choice my father made, every moment of safety I took for granted, every normal day of childhood I was blessed to have. Her absence was presence, her silence was protection. And now that I understand, I can finally say what I never got to say when she was alive. Thank you, Mom, for everything." He closed the journal and checked on Ruby. She was asleep. The locket she wore every day, the one with his baby picture, gleaming in the lamplight. Martin returned to the porch, sat in the rocking chair he'd built, and looked out at the dark forest. Somewhere out there, his mother had lived for 15 years. Had watched him grow up from careful distance, had loved him in the only way she thought was safe. The waste of it would always hurt. The missed years, the unnecessary sacrifice once the threat had ended. But beneath that hurt was something stronger, understanding. His mother had made impossible choices with incomplete information and had never wavered in her commitment to his safety. That was love. Not perfect, not easy, but real and enduring and ultimately triumphant. A light flickered in the memorial garden, probably just moonlight catching the car's chrome. But Martin chose to think of it differently. A reminder that some presences persist beyond death, that love truly does survive everything. "Good night, Mom," he said softly to the darkness. The wind answered, moving through the trees with a sound like a whispered reply. Inside the cabin, Ruby slept peacefully. The wedding dress hung in its cabinet, white and pristine. The letters lined the walls, testament to a mother's devotion. And above the mantel, the note remained, a promise kept, a truth proven, a legacy that would pass from generation to generation. Martin sat on the porch until late, rocking slowly, thinking about sacrifice and love and the ways they intertwine. He thought about Catherine, about his father, about his mother. All gone now, but none forgotten. All absent, but none truly lost, because love survives everything. His mother had been right about that. He was proof. Ruby was proof. And this cabin, built on land bought with sacrifice and inherited through grief, was proof too that something beautiful could grow from sorrow. That understanding could bloom from absence. That healing was always possible if you were brave enough to search for truth. As Martin finally headed inside to sleep, he paused at the threshold and looked back one more time at the memorial garden, at the car glowing softly in the moonlight, at the headstone marking his mother's rest. "We're okay, Mom," he said quietly. "Ruby and me, we're going to be okay." And in the gentle silence of the Pennsylvania woods, where a mother had once hidden to protect her son, where a father had faithfully visited his exiled wife, where a family had been broken and finally, beautifully, understood, peace settled like falling leaves, covering everything in quiet grace.